as we get older and we, with a therapist or with friends, reflect on our childhood, right? And then the subject of, you know, what was your experience of your parents like? And I guess I think all of us are probably have done therapy and are self-aware to be able to probably talk about that stuff pretty in an easier way now. But if you're new to that, there's this feeling that it's like, well, if I say anything negative, even if it's truthful, that's going to be that. Then I'm dishonoring my mom, my dad, my stepmom, my cousin, you know. So I can't go there. I can't actually face those things without it feeling dishonoring to what's my experience, right? And so I was thinking with the Universal Christ, and then just in general in our journeys, and with something like deconstruction, which is about sort of going backwards to move forwards. Do we do that with our church experiences, where it's like, can it be hard for us to say, hey, the stuff that I got taught at that place, now I'm looking back, or some of the things we did, like, wow, a lot of that was not great, you know? And then there's sort of that cliche thing, is like, oh, God will work all things together for good. And, you know, eventually we just kind of figure it out. And, you know, the important thing is that we still show up to church on Sundays now as adults. You know, like, stay faithful. But wait, what about people, you know? So
I like that. Can I take this?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So one thing I'll relate it to is, I think one of you guys said it at the book club, but it said, I don't go to church, I do church.
Mm-hmm.
And that really allowed me, even from as a child, I was brought up in the things of God. You can even say, well, when you honor your parents, right? And it reminds me even now, when my father, he decided at a very young age, when he came over from Peru at 16, he said, you know, me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Mm-hmm. So even from our birth, you know, I was actually dedicated on this, you know, stage, you know, to be consecrated for God. And I didn't know what that meant, right? And when as a kid, I understood that as, oh, you know, I'm bound to it, right? I used to always relate to it. I'm getting the Bible stuff down my throat, right? Because there was no option. But then when I left and then I had the options, I came back to it, right? And now I honor my parents, and I'm grateful because I'm able to, even when I hear scripture, it starts spurting out. Like, it's just like, oh, a verse comes up, and then I start finishing it, and then I'm like, oh, wow. And I can also relate it to where before, my pillars of my life were never faith, family, you know, faith, family, fitness, finance, and freedom. You see how the other three are, you know, kind of at the tail end, but the first are faith and family. So now I really honor my family, right? In what they want or what they want to do. But before, it was more of a, you got to do this or else, when I was growing up. But then now it was, no, I want to come back to this, but it's more of a relationship for myself. Maybe not even the way definitely not the way that I was brought up, because things evolve. Mm-hmm. Church evolves, right? You know, we can even go through, you know, my family was raised Catholic, right? They were born into Catholic, but then my mom and dad were the first Christians to kind of come up out of that. And that's an evolving, right? That's another uncovering. And then I would even say now I'm even, you know, there's another piece to the puzzle. I like your face, Jared. You're just kind of like,
No, I'm listening. Sorry, I'm listening.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Sorry if I look pissed off.
I'm
listening.
You even more now. I mean, when you were saying that, I was already doing the normal podcast thing, like preparing my answer, you know? Right. And when you started getting into the thing about the evolution, the spiritual evolution, this has been going on for thousands of years. It's the way that Yahweh, God, Source, has been able to move the way he has. It's easy to criticize what hasn't happened yet, but I think then you lose sight of what is happening, which is it seems like there's a very intentional movement towards something new. But those that missed it, or that hopefully are examining or editing their story, they came out of this Western evangelical space and they were angry, or they were just somehow, maybe I shouldn't even hold that on them. Maybe the abuses or the deception was so great that it caused them just to kind of run for the hills, really kind of reject God. But then there's this remnant other piece, of people that I believe can really see the beauty in doing the best they can. God had to share that with me one day, even about my parents. Like, they just did the best they really could.
Yeah.
And instead of me seeing the shortcomings as what I could easily see them as, right? Being the big boy again, right? So like the DM you were talking about, like, I have to be the big boy in my own life, right? No, I'm waiting for somebody to view this thing right or do this thing right. Meanwhile, there's people waiting for me to do it, So for me, I feel like I got set free of all of that anger, specifically at the organization, because I feel like I feel like the beauty of it is that it is being orchestrated as an evolution. And I don't even think that there's language for that, because what we were taught was to carry on the tradition, but what they meant was, like, keep it this way,
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the intention of the kingdom. So it just gives it this different story, when I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel or trying to interject my ideas into this dying, whatever. It's none of that. It's really like what you're talking about. The Spirit really is just having to elevate us. And if it's by putting us through some real tough shit, to cause us to have these Nicodemus moments where we're waking up to the invisible, to the Spirit, and through that process, looking back on this structure that we've come up through the eyes of love and through the eyes of all the fruit of the Spirit, just having that as your lens, seeing even that through that lens, and then asking the question, then what is the purpose? And asking the Spirit, then what would you have me to know or feel right now?
Yeah.
And kind of live a life that way. And that's sort of how I see it. You know, I think it's fragmented and sad, but I also think it's got a lot of upside for the kingdom.
I was just thinking how Yeshua was able to be a big part of the tradition that he was born into, yet then take it to another level. And and I think that's our opportunity. Whatever tradition that we have, to honor it, to be a part as much as we can. But then take it to that next evolution, the word you used, or the next part of the process, and still in a way that's honoring, which he did. Yeah. And he was a big part of his tradition, fully immersed in it, yet showed a different lens to it in the relationship with God, because his culture had one way of looking at God, or a few, and he offered another way. And so
and then said, I am the way.
he became what he believed, and the way that he was offering, that's who he was. And I think that's an amazing example for all of us. What we say, what we believe, we become, and I think one element, because that lens analogy, that's how I constantly think, but I want to kind of sit with it for a little bit. I love the evolution of technology as well, right? And we all have iPhones, I think, here. Maybe not, but
there's a green here. Greenie.
Whoa, guys, don't get all hatred on the Android. Okay, it freezes up a lot. You're right.
I just can't send you voice messages, and I'm like, oh, man. I gotta write it all out.
My only FOMO with the iPhone thing is the liking of the comments. When you
get everyone.
Yeah, and I'm like, dang, I wish I could do that. You can do it on like Anyway, so you're saying technology.
tech, yeah.
I'm lame because I have an Android.
No, you're not. You just are not updated with the current. No, I'm just kidding. One thing that
I'm not using a flip phone. Wow.
Apple
Harsh.
Apple has done is that instead of just having different lenses or adding different lenses, which most cameras do, they just put all the lenses.
Oh, yeah, now they got like three.
Let's just add it and not take it away. And I think that's something that I'm inspiring to be able to hold two different views or two different lenses, my old tradition or what I was brought up in with something maybe new, and having the ability to go back and forth. And I think that is a practice to hold, because it's easier to just have one lens. And maybe not a lot of us, and I know this is a practice for me, is that ability to switch lenses. And so, again, the design of Apple is one that is great to follow, and it's a good metaphor because they really spend a lot of time on innovation and design. And so
Mother Teresa said something like, perfect love is the absence of judgment. And you know, my inner critic part of my brain says, oh, you have to have judgment because God had judgment, and judgment just means to judge things but imagine literally looking at anybody in this world or any situation without any imposed judgment, literally just to see soul to soul, like this kind of soul gazing existence. And that's kind of a Yeshua energy, I feel like. And that's that thing, right? Being able to, so it's not just three lenses. It's like in the psychedelic space, you see these creatures that have millions of eyes. You know, it's just like, it's this perfect, can see everything for exactly what it is. And there's no impossible scenario. So who are we to bring anything other than pure presence and love to this being?
And that key is found in the revelation of Jesus Christ, where the beings around him have eyes all over.
Totally.
And so to have that ability where we ask for eyes, God, give me vision, you know, and practice new ways of seeing is one that I think will benefit us if we want to be in God's presence.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge for myself. Even like, that's exciting, right? Because if I go back into my child's mentality, right? As a child, church, God was something that was obligated, and you see the force, the language behind it is kind of just really like, you know, forced upon. And to now even rebirth it out to what I'm experiencing right now, the growth in and all around me. Like, I mean, I literally feel like the Holy Spirit is literally like not only to my right, to my left, but to my back, to my forward, and all through me, right? It's flowing. So there's no blockages. You can even say, like, you know, we're taught even like the chakras, you know, there's no blockage anymore. So that allows for me to really flow. And it goes back to what you were saying in terms of the communion. This was really what we were designed, right? Before all the programming, before, you know, you mentioned thousands of years, before all of that happened, this is what heaven was and is like. You get what I'm saying? And so for us to really allow that, we can, I mean, you know, a lot of people are like, well, how can you bring heaven on earth? Well, you can. I'm living right now a heaven that before, but you had to go through all of this. Like we just, we hear it constantly and constantly keep repeating it, is we have to descend before we can ascend. Right. It says that in the Bible, right? It said that, you know, even on the Universal Christ book, is the fact that we have to descend. What does that mean? I have to go through all the hard areas in my life, not pointing at religion, right? I could have very easily, personally, could have just came out, no, I hate Christianity. I could have also been born in a Buddhist home, right? But you see how it's so perfectly designed that literally everything that I've ever needed was right in front of me, right? But that descend, I had to look in areas in my life where is there blockages? Where is there things that are not meant to be there no more, and allow myself to really live in my purpose. And now that I'm stepping into that, I was just mentioning is the fact that I literally feel like every single step that I'm taking is like tiles being lit up. You can relate it to like Indiana Jones movies or, you know, like Tomb Raider, you know, that kind of texture is because every step I'm taking I'm still having to step back, and I'm just like, if I step here, is it going to lead to my destruction, or is it going to lead to a next step forward? Not saying that it's a quick fix. I mean, my life has gotten a lot harder, but it's a lot more beautiful. And then you look back and you're like, wow, I came back from all the way over there, you know, and I'm not going back, but it's a constant thing.
What's causing you to want to take the next step? If I'm listening to this, I'm contemplating between it being one of two things. Either A, there's something that you feel like you're moving towards or that you're aligned to that is big, that requires that, you know what I mean, kind of an adventure. Or B, the kingdom has been showing up in such a synchronistic way that it's sort of matter of fact, and it's kind of happening without me even having to plug into some big idea. Or is it a little bit of both?
The last one, it's both of them, because I kind of remind myself, you know, you say in the Bible, you have to be like a child to enter back into the kingdom. I can say that even for my grandmother. She's very childlike right now, right? She's 89 years old and so forth, but there's a lot of mannerisms as of a child. But for us to really get ourselves into where we came from, right, before we were programmed, before we were all of this, right, we got to take it back to the root. Like, okay, what was my mentality back then? And also reprogram yourself, rebirth that out of you. And then it really feels, even with the titles, like it feels like as long as you start aligning yourself, you are able to continually, things just start showing up and things just start aligning, that is just like, and then it just like, oh, wow. You know, it makes all sense. And I say they're downloads. I say, you know, they're visions. Sometimes they're dreams. Sometimes they're just like aha moments, right? So it's kind of like big impacts where they're just like, whoa, I can't deny that God's not real, right? Or that there's moments where just like, oh, okay. Like, that was a nice, quick reminder.
Let me tell you why that inspires me, being super transparent here. I think I'm usually more the first option. I'm plugging into some bigger thing, and it draws me forward. And in that, I feel like I'm so ambitious in that thing, in my mind at least, that God almost has to put these things in front of me, you know what I mean, just to kind of be faithful. But when you said that verse about coming as a child, the actual word that was used there is actually infant. And if you think about an infant, Yeshua is saying, if you don't come to me as an infant, you won't enter into the kingdom. An infant literally shits itself, can't talk, can't eat, can't walk, can't even roll over. It's literally 100% dependent on another being. And Yeshua says, unless you come to me as an infant, you're not going to enter into this invisible realm, or I should say, access the power and the livelihood of this invisible realm. So all that to say, I commend that aspect, and it's like this fractal thing that I feel like I wanted to let help me, because I don't know what it's like yet to be just out there like that because of what God's doing. I feel like that's something I'm very open to.
Yeah, and it's really not something that I'm even like planning, right?
Well, that's the point. That's the beauty of it.
Coming back from what I experienced in the last 14 years when I was away from my family and religion, you can call it the things of God, even coming back to it and also even evolving, right? It was a perfect timing when I started the cohort with Giving Business Soul. It was really around the time that I really started diving in. But I've allowed even my Instagram to be very public and open, right? Where people can have a window into my life, but they don't know what's going on. And so with that, I started receiving a lot of hate mail, right? people even just really, oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do breath works, you shouldn't do cold baths, you shouldn't do, you know, I like listening to Gregorian chants, right? And this is where I really am grateful for the community that has really came alongside me, because you need that. You need not only accountability from community, but you need accountability from brothers. And this is a brother that I've acquired, and actually it's really a mentor and somebody I've looked up to, and it's really Jacob, right? Because in this moment that I was just like, Jacob, I don't know what's going on. Like, why am I receiving so much bashing from even the community or the place where, you know, I'm trying to come back to. I'm trying to come back to the things of God, and where I'm coming for church, I'm receiving these places where it's just like I'm not received with open arms, you know? And so for me, it started burning something inside of me, like, okay, so if I'm receiving this, and luckily I had a strong foundation in God and I knew who God is, but I mean, imagine somebody that is brand new in the things of God, and then they're, you know, walking in through a church and they're receiving this much of, you know, and they have no context. It's just like, of course people are not going to want to come to the things of the church, right? And so that's where I started really kind of, you know, and so that's where you can get really caught up in that, oh, you know, why are they thinking of me like this, or judgmental and this and that. And I really appreciate what Jacob gave me, that wisdom was, and that emotional intelligence of, what is that making you feel, right? That's what really it made me feel, where I had to really put a mirror in front of my life, my body, and say, okay, how is that making me feel right now? What's that emotional texture? And where areas in my life am I really feeling where I am also judging? And I have to go in deeper, right? I had to go in, really dive in, right? Like, okay, I need to figure this out, you know? Because in my mind, I'm thinking like, I already came back to the things of God. I'm loving having a family now. I haven't been a brother for, 14 years. I haven't had a father, right? Because of my choice, because of my selfishness, right? And so then I'm like, okay, let me start uncovering all of these things. And it's like, you're looking for something at a house, right? And so you can't find it. So you just start opening drawers, you start opening things, and you just like, I need to find it, right? And so that desperation for it is really allowed myself to really now sit within myself. And I can truly sit here and tell you guys and look you in the eyes and say, man, I'm definitely not the Stephen I was yesterday, but definitely not the Stephen I was a year ago. But it took hard work. And now my question is, for the people in church or the people in religion or the people that call themselves Christians or call themselves religious, right? It doesn't have to just be Christianity. Are you allowing your life to be rigid, or are you allowing your life to flow? Because for myself, being in that flow has allowed me to uncover true treasures in my life and in the life of my families, in my relationships, right? Not only, and that has been really the game changer for me.
I was thinking about Psalm 119, where the psalmist says, your word is a lamp unto my feet, a light unto my path. And you think about what David's trajectory was like, and just so dense with drama. And his story of how he made it through that, and probably the most, famous psalm is that, we hear the word and we think Bible. He's not even talking about Bible. He's talking about the word there is the actual provision, whether it comes through a vision or through audible or some sort of, spirit encounter. But it's by those things that I've been able to move forward on this path. And that's a real biblical kind of, maybe even to some people listening, like religious way to frame that concept. But you're a person like the Zelda character in life right now, living that thing, but in 2022, where literally you're just kind of moving wherever the guidance goes. And the interesting thing is that this path is not a straight line. And I love that idea of opening drawers in a house, because I was like, yes, that's exactly what it feels like. But sometimes in the church, when you're opening drawers, they don't like that because they want to know exactly where it's at. They want there to be taped in every room. If you need it, it's right here. There's such a there's such a satiation towards like needing to be right and know the answer. But interestingly enough, when Yeshua was about to go away, he told them that the Spirit will reveal all truth to you. So this path is supposed to be lucid and interesting and adventurous. And I think that I think one thing we can say we have in common is that we're all tapping into that side of the kingdom and we're loving it.
I love it. Yeah. I had a thought earlier. I was thinking along the lines of our experiences and growing up and I was thinking like, forgiveness, right, is such a big part of the journey. Like, and I was thinking like, you don't forgive, or you don't forgive things that never happened, right? We're trying to forgive people for things that happened and like things they did. And like when you're the quote about Mother Teresa, right? The things that are done, where love was supposed to be expressed, perfectly, it was expressed with judgment and with anger and with fear. Mm-hmm. And those are the things that have wounded us over the years. And it's also interesting how trauma is such a thing that is so talked about all the time now. And it's like, but it's a beautiful thing to not give up also, and to learn how to let go of that stuff too. And then, you have kids now, so you are a parent now, you're in the parent role. So that's a whole nother layer too in life. Like, we could be hard on our parents and then we become parents. So that's another thing, another side note thing. But then even the thing you said about the infant, it's like the other thing that the infant has is like innocence. The other thing the infant has is like, they're not jaded by the world, like screwing them over, Yeah. They don't have that. And so it feels like like a lot of things Jesus says, it's like, is that an impossible thing for us to uphold, like to really be an infant and actually come into every situation not assuming the worst in other people, not assuming people are out to like screw us over, like that verse that's like, there is no fear in love, and fear involves like torment. And this idea of like, so many choices we make are out of fear, but really that's something that's been passed down to us, so we don't really know any better until we experience the love, and then we can start showing up differently.
If I can add, so. He said, if you don't come to me as an infant, and it'd be interesting, through this religious lens to kind of want to say, oh, that's a rule, infant. Okay, guys, Jacob made a good point today. We are to be infants from now on. We're going to institute the infant, narrative. But that's how you check in to the kingdom. That's how you enroll. That's your boot camp. That's the bag you pack when you say I'm in, is that I come as an infant. And to do that, I think it's partly what we're doing today. So imagine when people would come, when Yeshua first spoke that, they were having to detach from a Jewish, temple narrative, right. And that was already built and established. And Yeshua came and basically said, that he came to fulfill, not to abolish this law, this thing that they're doing. But anyway, I think that deconstruction was different 2,000 years ago than it is today. Mm-hmm. I think you could have made a clean cut ties wise from being a Jew back then, whereas today, religion is so kind of convoluted and spread out and given so many different brands that to become an infant, I think requires, as you put it, Stephen, it requires a certain amount of work, because you have to, for me, it feels like I have to really put myself in this story as a person that needs to become deprogrammed in order to become more valuable. And in that, you realize the delicacy of that, because you want to hold on to the principles that really are going to help you fulfill the will of God, but also be really open to the stuff that doesn't feel good anymore. The more you become reliant on the Spirit, the things that don't feel good anymore, then you kind of lean into those, and you use your breath, and you trust in the process and in your time with God, but you move in that direction. And I think that's where the opposition comes. And if we can hold tight, learn to hold that space by demonstrating the fruit of the Spirit, I think that's where a lot of real magic can take place, to move through it that way.
Jared, I love that you asked that question. Is it even possible? I think that's the question. And when I think questions, I think quest. It's a journey. And that's a journey that we're on, and that's the beauty of being alongside of each other. Because where are you in this journey? Have you seen it? And is it possible in your life? Is it possible in anybody's life around you? And I want to honor my brother, because this last week, what we've been through, I've had some good friends ask me, "How are you doing? What's going on?" and keeping tabs on me. But I think how we operated was very infant-like, meaning there was a lot of dependence. And when I think about infants as well, there's no infant alone that's even thriving, much more less surviving. You need others. And so the dynamic, I think, that as I've talked to friends, is that we were just operating as a family, and that's how we're doing what we're doing, and we can't really explain it. And if I try to explain it, I'd probably miss it. But that would be a broad view, is that we're operating as a family. And in that family, I think my brother has been able to demonstrate what an infant would demonstrate, which is dependence, which is something that he's able to walk in, something that's unique to him. And because of that, we're all better for it as a family. And I think it encouraged us to also walk in dependence, where I'm going to trust my brother and how he's uniquely designed to take care or find solutions for certain problems. And he's found that trust in me as well. And I found that trust. We found that trust in our parents, in our siblings, in our cousins, in our uncle. And so I think when you're in family, well, that's Yeshua's design, right? Infants are brought into this earth in a family. And so I think in my quest of this same question is what family do you have around you? And it doesn't always have to be blood related, but having a family, having a brother or a father that would even allow you to be an infant, to not have the answers, and just be a dependent, and to walk with someone that can cover you, that can provide for you. And so that's how I've experienced Christ in this last season or this last week, because we've seen it. And it's hard to explain it to others, but I've seen Christ in this last week through my brother, through my family. So,
but I've seen it through you too, man. And the thing is that I was, even to drive up here, right? I was like, we keep seeing this number 7 and 17. I was born on the 7th. My brother was born on the 17th. And everywhere, right? It just starts popping up, and that's where you start seeing it. Like, you see it in dreams and big old visions, but then you see it in little things, right? And you start seeing, and then when we added it together, because we really saw was also the 24, right? The number. And this year has really been a deconstruction of the year, where every mold that we've maybe even computed in our head, in our heart, in our family, in church, and friends, it's all been deconstructed. And I feel like 2023, we're really going to be a year of building, and not in our family. That's with every single relationship we're around, right? And the ones that are not, then they have been disregarded. And the year 2024 is going to be really a year of that we're going to be able to reap the harvest, right? Receive from the fruit of the tree. But it goes back to, like, even for everyone listening and watching this, like, you don't want to be looking around. And sometimes that is the case, right? But you just got to change your circle. If you're looking around, there's no one around, you got to change that village that is there to be able to support you, right? Because what I'm experiencing right now, and it's so amazing to see it, but it does take the work that we're doing, right? It does take the amount of hard conversations. I've had a couple thousand of conversations with my brother where even the beginning of the year we had a fallout and just didn't want to connect. But it takes those hard conversations to be able to be like a tree. And that's where I position myself, like a tree, right? And then it can be several trees. Like right now we have 4 trees. And is that tree only have one branch, or does it have many branches? Right? So every area in your life, is there branches and is there leaves on that branch? And if there's not leaves in that branch, are you going ahead and doing what's right? Is the foundation good? Is it by a stream of water? I'm sure there's another scripture on that. I can quote relatable scriptures, but I love being in a setting like this because I know, my brother can jump in, Jared can jump in, Jacob can jump in. It's like, this is a scripture.
Did you record any of these hard conversations? So when we go to the break, we could cut to your
I
hard
thought that was a commercial for next episode, maybe.
Yeah. No,
And on the next.
You said 1,000. I'm like, let's cut to you. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. What were they?
I feel like that, though, when I hang out with Jacob. I'm like, oh, we should just record our talks, dude. This would be like 25 great episodes now.
Imagine recording a talk.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're doing.
Oh, on my podcast.
Yes.
I love it.
Capital M.
I think what, like, when you say family and obviously the community we have knowing each other and the book club and it's sort of like when you talk about hope, right? When people say that word or or the feeling hopeless, is it possibly from, like, sometimes we think, oh, if someone's hopeless, it has to do with like their career or like the direction that they want to go in their life or like the goals that they never met. Sometimes it go. I'm not saying all the time. It can go into that, but really it's more like, do you, because hopelessness and then like loneliness go together, and it's like, do you feel like you have friends? Like, do you feel like you have brothers and sisters, and you can be in church and feel like you don't connect and belong with people? And I know that's like a big subject, right? Like, but to me, when I think of hope, I think of like looking forward to hanging out with you guys like this. And I know we hang out and we're mostly not recording a podcast, but like I look forward to seeing you on Monday nights and having coffee. And then I think, especially Christmas time, like now, right? Like, do they look forward to seeing people, or is it like they don't have that? All right, guys. Well, welcome back again to the conversation. And we just had a nice little long break and talked about a bunch of stuff. But Jacob, thoughts? Well,
ooh, that's
yeah,
deep. That sounds like a podcast.
A little too
Jacob
general.
thoughts.
Jacob thoughts.
Jacob
Question
thoughts.
with 3 question marks after it.
What I was observing as the brothers were talking, I was watching this kind of dramaturgy form, this idea around their dads. Well, so I asked the question during our break, was your dad's, the fact that his health failed, was that the catalyst? Because you guys talk about this newness of your family and your dynamic. And so I was asking, just to be clear, because it seemed like that was the case, and both of you with a resounding yes said, yeah, that was the catalyst. And so we had a beautiful conversation about the fact that, we're talking about the kingdom, and I think we're going more that direction than we are about, deconstructing, because that's been talked about. Like, now let's get to work, and I was able to see a different perspective of that dad's, his pain and his fear and getting to the end of his life, he felt like, reminded me of the Yeshua command, basically, to come as an infant, right? As just a completely stripped being, stripped of everything. And that your dad demonstrated that not out of his own will, but that he was able to hold that. And part of that happening caused you guys to come to this reckoning in your own lives spiritually and just kind of get rocked. And prior to it, both of you were going through your own journeys that were leading you to this moment where you were going to be asked to do something. And I got this idea that, it's still early in the story. I love that we're here on the church grounds tonight, recording this podcast, but it feels like I got this idea, and I got a little choked up of imagining your dad just, and the saints and the elders and the congregants just really praying for this city and this region, and praying for the move of God and all the history. And anybody who's in Pomona knows that there's a beautiful side to it, but there's also kind of a shadow aspect here. And so it's a lot of spiritual work. And who would have thought that the answer to Yahweh's brilliance, the way he decided to answer this prayer, was going to be through such pain, and sacrifice, but that through that, your dad coming back to Christ in a way, this kind of Christ, universal Christ thing that we're talking about, this difficult time, just for it to, crack his consciousness enough open, just to be open to hearing about the breath, the cold, and all of a sudden new ways that you're piecing this story together, but still holding on to, the best parts of what was there before. And then your guys' response out of faithfulness, and not that it was all on your own merit. You were both going through a phase where something was called upon in you, and you had to, you had to respond, or at least you felt like you did. That all that kind of crescendos into this kingdom, beautiful disaster, right? Like that God can take something so scary and so potentially bad, and this new thing can bloom from it that just feels like it's so dense with promise and with like kingdom opportunity. So I was just thinking that that's actually seems to be kind of like a metaphor, for what the church is experiencing, or I think will be soon. This is maybe kind of a precursor to that.
Yeah.
But how the majority of, I think all of us in this room, are, our real devotion to God really didn't start, at least for me, until I was broken, and we tell these stories and there's little hints of shame and stuff, but I think in the future it's just going to be beautiful. It's just going to be like, oh, that was what cracked you open. Oh, that's what cracked you open.
Yeah. There's that one scripture that says, I think it's like Philippians, or Paul is like, he who starts a good work in you will, it's like if God starts something, he'll finish it, right? And we're kind of like, okay, well, we're here, so that means the start part has happened, but things get passed down, and I think it's like not quitting, is one thing to do, right? Like, don't give up, but then the next layer to that is having like a vision, and that the visions of our parents and other people in history that have already all gone before us, that there is something to learn from all of that. And when you do look at people who have made impact. It's like that, the thing you just said, right? The pain and the suffering. Like everybody has had to forgive. Everybody has had to have sleepless nights where they're wrestling with things. Everyone has had to have conflict, you know. It's like watching a movie, and, you know, for like not a good movie, usually it's because the conflict element and the, you know, the acting's not great, but it's always like, yeah, that's not believable. But it's good when we're like, man, that person really went through it. That's because that's how life is. It's complicated. It's not easy. And so, yeah, it's a beautiful thing for us to just be talking about that tonight, you know, with you guys. So,
No,
all right, sorry, I just cut out for a second.
No,
I
you're
thought
fine.
it sounded like it cut out, so I stopped.
You're fine.
And it looked weird.
And thank you so much, Jacob, for, I mean, what I described and my brother described of the story of my father.
Yeah.
And you adding, I mean, it just felt like I didn't want you to stop. You know, it just felt like it was a whole video, a whole movie of just how this year has played out. But it really was what I was feeling at that moment was the brokenness that it took.
Mm-hmm.
There was a moment even when, you know, you could say our world started crashing down. And I can even relate it to when I was as a kid. I remember being on these steps, on these steps, and we would have vigilias where there were just like all night prayers, right? And I put my head like this down so that I could go ahead and go to sleep, because they would go for like, you know, till 12 o'clock at night, past sometimes. And being at these steps, you know, they had a call, and I forgot how old I was, and they were, you know, asking who people wanted to receive the gift of tongues, and you know, and I remember vividly they put their hands on me and they said, you know, if you want to receive, and I was like, yeah, I want to receive, but it was really more forced on, you know, and they put their hands on me, and you know, I just wasn't speaking, you know, just they were praying, and it just did not want to come out. Right. And so it just like it got to it. And I remember they went to the opposite side, came back, and, you know, just it's back to like, you know, that blockage. It just didn't want to go through. And even as I'm speaking right now, it's really coming all together. But it's, you know, I even made it up. I even started going like, you know what I mean? Just so that they could get off their hands off of me, you know? But that's the reality.
I'm having flashbacks to my childhood too. But
yeah.
Anyway, keep going.
But in that, right, I had to be as a child to relate myself. But then I go back to the brokenness at the time where my whole world fell apart. Something that, you know, it was so beautiful, the fact that I was brought to my family 7 months prior to my father even getting sick. So I was no longer looking at my dad's body, right? And I kept saying that. When I was praying over him and kept just asking God, that song that kept coming up, Touch of Heaven by Alabaster, by Bethel, I kept saying, I know that your body is no longer, you know, functioning. It's no longer, it's basically dead, but your spirit is alive, Father. Right? Your spirit is alive. And all I need is, like in the scriptures says, all you need is that to touch the mantle of Yeshua, right? To be able to receive that healing. All I was asking is like, God, if you can just breathe on my father, he'll just get up out of this bed. But that wasn't going to be able to happen. So I related to, as a child, I didn't receive I couldn't receive the gift of tongues, right? And there's a picture of me even that we have that I didn't realize too, but my mother is literally has her hands over me praying like this, and I'm just in brokenness, and I'm playing this song Touch of Heaven, because we had to be taken to an opposite room where it was like a waiting room, while we had just received the news, right, that they said we have to take over your dad's body. If not, then we're gonna go ahead and you're not gonna have a father in an hour. To receive that news, it was just like, what? And I was literally, all the different steps and things that had to happen, right? Even the things I described to you before, it's like all of that needed to happen so that I could be in my right as a son to be there for my father, to be there for my brother, for my sister, and to be able to hold my mother when she literally felt like she just like was falling apart, you know? And I no longer was living in regret because God had given me 7 months with my father. And I could stand in my right in humility, but in that brokenness, going back to receiving the tongues, I'm like this. And all of a sudden, I just felt like someone opened a faucet, and I just started crying and pouring out. And I just started speaking beautifully in tongues. But it was a scary moment for me, if I can be honest, is because at that moment in my head, I was like, my father passed away. The anointing from my father went and left me and came onto me, and I'm receiving what maybe I wanted as a child and couldn't receive, but now I'm receiving that. And it was scary for me, but then I just felt peace, right? And then being able to come to, and then I'm opening my eyes, and then that's really when we receive, you know, and then the journey continues on. But I know that I didn't plan on saying all of that, but it really was from my heart, because it's just, that's really the reality of things, that you need to experience that brokenness. That moment in your life where you don't understand why everything happened, but even just for that moment, it makes it all worth it.
Even just the way you guys talk now about the property and the plans and what you have going on. And I was thinking about your gift of tongues, and it says that you will receive power. After that, the Holy Spirit comes upon you. And you don't see it as speaking with power, but knowing that this property is in the family's name, and that you now have the blessing of, of leadership, of the patriarch, of who God has set here, creates this power, and this whole thing kind of just starts to move. Whereas I come in and think, like, I feel almost like these are rich kids. Know what I mean? Like, you have there's a power to all this thing that's happening. And to you, it might just seem, well, I don't think it does seem circumstantial, but it might just, because you're watching it happen every day, you may not maybe see that texture. But for me, experiencing it, it feels more like I'm glad to be witnessing this. You know what I mean? So I think there's a power aspect.
And I think it goes back to just really that silver and gold I have none, but what I have I give to you. Because I can really say that I've been a rich man. I mean, I experienced success at a young age, even, you know, being in the banking industry and so forth. But I also experienced brokenness as a man. And even my father coming out of, you know, the induced coma that he was in, for him to say, you know, the things that he said when he came out, it just, I had that vulnerability moment with my father that I was able to say, Father, I know exactly what you feel, because I'm a broken man also. I'm a broken vessel ready to be made into something beautiful. But that all needed to happen so that we could have that connection as father and son, but not only father and son, but now as brother and brother, and with even conversations that we're having now, right? But it goes back to that vulnerability. You know, you, like they say, right, the wars can be saved or not even began if we just had a better and clearer communication. You know, but there are hard conversations, you know, that we need to have, and we're not willing to do those most of the time.
Yeah, I think that this common theme of the suffering makes me think that what we can model, all four of us and your dad and everybody who's witnessing this, is that we're trying to create a new way that we associate suffering. It seems to me like suffering, especially in the West here, is such a thing we try to avoid. Yeah. Even though when Yeshua was doing the Sermon on the Mount, he was kind of saying who's blessed, or who are those that really have everything they need from God. It's the people that are at the toughest stages of life. And then even Paul talks so much about the suffering, and anyway, it's just neat to think about this. It's another fractal. It's another upgrade that the kingdom gets if we can really lean into this idea that when we are going through suffering, I don't know how to do this other than we tell our stories, but that when we're going through suffering, we don't right away try to run or medicate or avoid or blame, to learn to sit in it, right? And to embrace it for all that it is, all the embarrassment and the shame we might experience and the loss that we might experience as it's happening. Have a in-body experience or an actual revelation that this is the answer to my prayer. This is the way that the kingdom is
Designed.
getting my attention. Yeah. And so I'm very present right now. I'm very present to that. I think that would be a great thing to model.
Sammy, do you want to touch on something? I just saw 1717.
Oh, by the way, when you were talking about the spirit, so my first time I looked, because Sam during the break said that we can look at the board there to get a time. And I swear I hadn't looked at it the whole time. And I looked at it and it was 11:11.
Oh, wow.
That's my numbers. Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm 633 all the way, but yeah.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I really appreciate you guys demonstrating vulnerability, because we could talk about it, but you guys demonstrate it. And that's something that I value highly, because it's not demonstrated often.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the tears, crying, weeping can have a negative connotation as sorrow, which it can be. But you mentioned another thing, that it could be demonstrating something. Do you mind saying that phrase that you mentioned on the break?
Yeah, actually, Francisco Jara, he's a friend and teacher of many of us here. We were talking about crying one day, and I just cry a lot. Sometimes even, I mean, it's usually a deep thought, and I was feeling a little bit insecure about it at one point. And he's like, it's just, crying is not sadness most of the time. It's just when your heart is wide open. Mm-hmm. And it just hit me. It really resonated with me, because I thought that's exactly what it is. There's this prying open of this actual heart that the Bible talks about, our heart. It's like this powerful, powerful energy. And when the heart's open and it's on the earth, what it feels is just tears come out, because the body just goes into a type of stasis that the only way that it can process that is through tears. Mm-hmm. So I think on the outside, as we train ourselves better in the next generation, tears don't always mean like, I'm sorry, brother. Sometimes it's like, fuck yeah. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's like, it's a beautiful thing when you're crying.
It's a powerful form of communication as well. And I know that many children have heard, stop crying.
Yeah.
We'll give you something to cry about.
Yeah.
Or why are you crying? Why are you crying? And have to explain their emotion when it's very difficult to explain emotion. That's why we have a demonstration of emotion rather than words. And sometimes we just need to cry. No words spoken, just cry. And so I appreciate it. I mean that from the sincerity of my heart. Thank you guys for demonstrating that. It's something I know it's benefited me, but I need more of. It's a beautiful practice.
I usually ask people after people are, and along the lines of talking about like pain and suffering, right? Like for whoever's listening, everybody's in a different place, right? But it's kind of like, what advice do we give to people who are deconstructing or in a situation where they're going through something really hard?
I swear to God, I just looked and it was 2222. Like,
I love it. Dude, that's us all the time.
So we could try to conclude with that. Like, what advice do we give? What advice do we give?
I know.
What 2222? What does that mean?
Because 11:11 was the last time I looked, and it's just a trip.
Well, side note, I was born in 1:11 a.m.
Deep.
That's it. That's the conclusion. So, yeah, I was born and now I'm alive. The end.
And we're so glad about that.
So
Yes.
what advice would we give to someone who's just, you know, trying to continue to follow Jesus, and maybe, you know, I mean, I guess I don't know if that's too general or too broad, but like
what you're saying.
something like that, right? Because we have touched on a lot of really good things, and
I could take a stab
yeah,
at it.
yeah.
You know, when Paul's talking to Timothy, he says that Yahweh has not placed upon you the spirit or energy of fear, which that word there means timidity.
Mm-hmm.
But that Yahweh has endowed you with power, which is dunamis, dynamite. It's this explosive cosmic power. Love, which is agape, which is not just unconditional. It's a love that exceeds language, and a sound mind, or the Greek is better defined by saying a sober mind. And the word sober there means to live without illusion. And so Paul's trying to talk to young Timothy, who's a superstar and just motivated to really grow this thing. And he says that don't allow timidity to come in, or fear, because that's not of God. Right. But that God has given you power, dynamite, dunamis, like Yeshua said, John 14:12, the dynamite things I did on this earth, you'll do, and even greater things than these will you do, because I go to my Father, which is in heaven. So he's given you power, he's given you love, the ability to move through any situation, like the eyeball situation, Sam, right? Like where you can move through anything because you have this impenetrable love. And then you have sound mind, you have sobriety, you lack illusion, meaning you're actually able to be placed as an eternal soul in your beautiful earthly body. We're like trophy creations in the cosmos. You know, we're imagers of Yahweh. And to actually go through this lifetime playing the game, seated in this space without illusion, you really can start to see what's happening. Why is Big Pharma doing this, and why is the military industrial complex? You kind of start seeing things, but you're not angry. It's not dualistic and all that. It's just being able to hold that space. And I think my advice to anybody would be that if you're listening to this, or if you're open to a different storyline, you're going to be met with a couple of emotions, or a couple of feelings, and one of them is going to be fear, that there's a consequence once you go against the empire. And, you know, I don't like us versus them. I don't think that's Yeshua based, but I will say that there's some interesting verses that we don't pay a lot of attention to, but Yeshua says, I didn't come to bring peace, you know, but fire, and, you know, the separation between family. And I think that some of that is hyperbole about the fact that this message is so unique and so fresh that it's going to require courage, sacrifice, basically getting our spiritual shit together. And so, yeah, I guess what I've told plenty of people is, I'm not going to tell you what to think, you know, but I can tell you that, which is a Joseph Campbell kind of quote that I'll probably butcher, but, you know, that the thing you seek the most is in the scariest cave, you know, and that you weren't in the church or in spirituality because you just felt like it. It's part of your soul's trajectory. And if now you're being called into something different, then just be brave and really follow your heart, and don't listen to the story that says that you're a wretch and that that God is outside of your body and he's far away and it's all about getting off of the earth. It's not. You know, there's a beautiful thing happening right here that we want to invite you to join us in.
Yeah. That's really good. Do you guys want me to go, or you guys want to go?
Or I think
Yeah.
I think that was my attempt at doing a
was a
little.
beautiful
Oh
mini
well,
wrap
because
up.
the camera probably stopped.
That was beautiful for the camera, but I think everyone can kind of give closing
Yeah,
remarks
for sure.
kind
Yeah,
of along
I'd like
that.
to. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love that.
Yeah. Don't all jump at once. All right. Well, I mean,
That's good. Go.
no, I mean, following in the same texture of what you were saying, kept hearing good stewards of what God has given us.
Mm-hmm.
That's really for myself. I was essentially brought into this world. I like to differentiate the three things, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. I would say emotionally and spiritually, pretty dialed in, at a young age. But for the listeners watching, or maybe not watching, but hearing, the taste that I want you guys to have is that don't make it so rigid, but then also don't think you have to surrender it all. Keep reminding myself of, even small ripples make big effects. Like the necklace that I have around my neck, and my brother does too, is there's a little cross inside of a big cross. And it's because small beginnings, I'm butchering this, small beginnings, or big things come from small beginnings. And the context goes in that the big impacts that you're going to make in your life go back to this being a good steward of what God has given you, and that means your body. So for myself, I experienced big change doing the physical activities of what I am inducing, not only with, certain addictions and certain things, but also in physically. What am I doing? Am I moving? I think one thing that I really want to convey to you guys that are listening is that the balance between like even the yin and the yang of experiencing the stillness of God, but then also seeking after. Because a lot of times we don't capture that, and we need to capture that. So tune in. I put a challenge out there. Put yourself on your bed where you normally sleep, and put yourself in the middle of that bed. No phone. Put your phone on Do Not Disturb, and just sit with yourself. And you're going to experience struggle, but I promise you, you will get off that bed feeling something different than when you got on.
Yeah.
Just leave it with that.
Can I go last? What do you think, Samuel?
Sure. Yeah, those two things you guys mentioned, I really can appreciate it. I'm not just saying that, but it's from my heart. The call to be brave, like you mentioned, and part of that bravery is to one of the practices I've done, which a mentor has demonstrated for me, is constantly asking, what lies am I believing right now? And you touched on illusion. That's a question that if you ask, answers will come, and maybe be more specific and just like say what's one or two lies I'm believing, because there's been a whole lot of lies that I've believed, and but that starts removing this illusion that we kind of are enslaved to, or believe that we're enslaved to. And so one of the illusions that is lifting is that I didn't have a choice, and that kind of goes with the idea of slavery. But that would be one that I would leave to anybody listening, is that you do have a choice. I would inspire you, empower you to know you have a choice every day, every moment. Choose. And you're not a slave in Christ. You are not a slave. Choose. And it takes bravery. Choose love. And it's a beautiful thing. The world can change if we chose love. And in Christ we can. So take those moments, isolated in your room, and ask deep questions and listen carefully, because Yeshua loves to speak.
I want to say to somebody who was resonating with what you said. I love that story of when Yeshua sent them out on their discipleship quest, and they came back to report to him, and they said that there's this other group down the way, and they're casting out demons and they're doing all these things, but they're not a part of us. And I don't know what sort of response they were, trying to elicit from Yeshua, but his response to me was more interesting than we give it credit. He literally wasn't concerned. He just said, "Were they against you?" No. Well, then they were with us. They're part of us. He didn't say, where are they from? What are they saying? What were they doing? Do you know? Did you recognize any of them, or did you go to school with any of them? Zero. He did not care. And so I think what I want to put out there is that if you're not against what God's doing, just lean into it and go. Don't look for the right way. God is calling trailblazers right now. And if you're asking God to speak to you and to move through you, do not look for somebody to show you the way. Mm-hmm. This is not what's happening right now. Right now, as the light's coming on and as the Spirit is convicting the world of sin, meaning of life in the matrix, the archetype that's rising up is this trailblazer. Yeah, that's where that bravery comes in.
Yeah, I would say, thank you guys for sharing. I mean, everything you guys all just said, I love. I mean, to add on to that, I mean, it's like sometimes the assumption is like, look to someone else, but it's like the trailblazer thing is like, look to yourself, like if there is no one else, like you be the thing that you're wanting to model, I would say,
which is the call to leadership.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you've said this before, leader means one who goes first.
Go first.
Yeah. And I would say that a big thing that's, I feel like I'm leaning into along the lines of embracing pain and suffering is the belief that kind of like what you said about it having a choice, the belief that anything can change at any given time, like, which can, if you're in a struggle, feel like not hope, right? Because the despair that you feel is nothing will ever change, or this pain that I'm in, which we've all heard that and we've all experienced the despair of feeling like, I think this is forever, right? The thing I'm in, I think this is forever, and not just someone who has suicidal thoughts, but just being convinced that there's no ability to change. So I would say that, like, lean into that tomorrow, today, whenever you're listening to this, I mean, you can start making choices and steps and changing who you are around, changing your community, initiating having a vulnerable talk with someone. Like, you have the power and the ability to do that. And I think also that, like, the thing in scripture, like you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free, we kind of default that to being like, I need to know more of scripture to understand the kingdom and understand who I am. But it's also, what's the truth about the pain and the suffering that you're in right now? Like the thing you said about laying on your bed and just this fear that we have of silence, like, what's going to come up if I just sit alone with myself? And probably a lot of things, and that's beautiful because that's the truth. That is the truth of where you're at right now, December 2022, and go with that, like, write that stuff down, journal that stuff down, and go, build on sitting with yourself, and like there's some power in that,
Well said.
So
Wow.
wow, guys. Well, I don't know how to end things. Just fade out and then music. Let's
Yeah.
all do a rap. No, I'm kidding.
No, I think too. One another. I'll leave with 3 pillars. Do your best.
Mm-hmm.
That means like literally just put out every single cent, every single ounce of everything you can. Be the best version of yourself every single day. And when you put your head to rest, you're going to know that you can pray and say that God's going to do the rest. God's going to go ahead and bless it.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, God's going to do the rest. So you're going to do your best, pray that it's blessed, and God will do the rest.
Love it.
I'll end on a note if you don't mind.
Go
No,
for
because
it.
it just
No,
feels
it's
like a
fine.
good way to.
Yeah, no,
One of the
it's-
things that I would say as like a big brother, mentor energy, is that every one of us has told a story about how while God was leading us, we were actually suffering, or that it was really difficult. And it's not until you're on the other side of it that you can look back and say, God was so good back there. And just, I think that what comes up for me is that first 6 months, year, I don't know, whatever that season is, you don't know that it's God until you know. So if you're seeking, if you're asking, then just maybe trust that it is, and really walk through that process wholeheartedly, because it's beautiful, and not that any of us have arrived, but I think what we have done is just got to a place where we are on a path,
Yeah.
and it's not defined, and it's a little scary, but this adventure has really got us all got a little bit, and there's lots of room here.
Well, not to have the last word, but this is my podcast, so.
So thank you, everybody, for
Yeah.
listening, and I'm just kidding.
No, I was going to say, yes, thank you guys for listening out there, but I want to say thank you to you brothers here. I know we've been texting and trying to make this happen for a little while, and I know it's like Christmas season, and Jacob has kids, and happy birthday to Silas, and yeah. But really just grateful for, not just doing a podcast together, but just the brotherhood and the friendship, and
Life,
the community, and the book club, and I feel like this is. I feel like we're just getting started, which is a phrase I feel that a lot when we do the book club. I'm like, this is like the beginning of something. It's not like, oh, this is going to end in 2 weeks. I'm like, I feel like we're just getting started with a lot of things.
which is the exact definition of hope.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Yeah. And I feel so much hope, and it always is connected to other people. It's always connected to love and community.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that's what that is. It's like if you spend the whole day alone, even if you're an introvert, right? And then you talk to someone and you have like a conversation, and you're like, oh yeah, this is what life's about, talking to other people. Like even something like that, you're like, you're not meant to be in your room all day, guys, even if you have COVID. No, I'm kidding. But it's like that. Yeah. So this is what I think the biblical thing of community. This is what this is doing this right here. So thank you guys for that.
It was our pleasure, my pleasure.
My joy. Thank you.
All right. Android signing off.
Bye, everybody.
Pflücker's out.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the podcast. The end of show notes has some just info about the podcast that you can see there. All of the info for Jacob, Samuel, and Stephen. Social media, you can find that in the notes as well. As always, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.